On their wedding night, the groom's all revved up for some action with his new wife, but he hits a speed bump. She's wearing a chastity belt. Turns out, during the wedding bash, Ursula's mom handed her this awkward gift with a stern warning not to have kids. See, Ursula and Buendia are cousins, and the family's freaking out about potential freak babies. Ursula's mom knows a relative who had a kid with a pig's tail due to inbreeding.
A mí no me importa tener cochinillo, siempre que puedan hablar.
Buendia couldn't care less, but Ursula's spooked by her mom's warning. So their big night fizzles out in an uncomfortable silence. For days after, Ursula keeps shutting Buendia down, leaving him high and dry with just a little physical contact. This newlywed couple's in a real pickle, and soon the whole town's buzzing about it. With all that pent-up energy, Buendia throws himself into cockfighting, but that's where things go south. One night, Buendia's rooster turns into a feathered fury, taking out Aguilar's bird in no time flat. Aguilar, sore loser that he is, starts running his mouth to save face. The air gets thick with tension, and Buendia's face darkens as a guller hits a nerve.
Vete pa tu casa y ármate, que te voy a matar.
Buendia challenges Aguilar to a duel to the death and tells him to go grab his weapon. Buendia storms home, grabs his spear under Ursula's shocked gaze, and heads out. The nosy neighbors think they're in for a real showdown, but it's over in a flash. Buendia's spear finds Aguilar's throat, and just like that, Buendia's life takes a hard left turn. This wake-up call makes Buendia and Ursula realize they can't keep dodging reality, or more people might die because of them. Even if they end up with a monster kid, they're done holding back their love and desire. The mayor rules it a clean kill. Duels are life or death, after all, and Buendia won fair and square with the whole town watching. But the drama's far from over. That night, Ursula's dog starts going nuts, and when she checks it out, she nearly jumps out of her skin. There's Aguilar's ghost in the yard, looking just as messed up as when Buendia skewered him. Buendia, cool as a cucumber, grabs his spear and tries to shoo the spirit away, but this ghost's not taking the hint. It's there 24/7, even playing peeping Tom when Buendia and Ursula try to get frisky. Its hollow, accusing stare is enough to give anyone the heebie-jeebies. Even so, Buendia's got no regrets. He'd stick Aguilar again in a heartbeat if he had to. He decides it's time to blow this popsicle stand and find the sea he's been dreaming about. There, they can shake off their ancestors' fears and rules, and maybe ditch the Clinny ghost too. Before they leave, Ursula's mom gives her belly a worried rub,
Nunca vas a poder escapar de tu destino.
her words hanging like a ball and chain around Ursula's neck. Buendia's a born leader, and a bunch of young folks jump on his bandwagon. They pack up their families and everything they own, heading over the mountain on a wild adventure. As Ursula's morning sickness kicks into high gear, she realizes she's got a bun in the oven. She picks up a piglet from the bushes, but then turns out it's just a nasty nightmare, but her mom's warning's still eating at her. She's terrified she'll pop out a little piggy. When they hit a valley, she goes into labor and has a boy. She checks his backside in a panic, but there's no curly tail in sight. Ursula finally breathes easy. They keep trekking for months, but the going gets tough. They're walking a tightrope over bottomless canyons, where one wrong step means game over. After 2 years of mountain hopping, they finally hit the highest peak. Buendia's all pumped to see the ocean, but instead, he gets an eyeful of endless swamp. But Buendia's not throwing in the towel. He's dead set on crossing that swamp to find a sea. Problem is, the fog's so thick, they keep going in circles. Eventually, most folks are running on empty, too weak and sick to keep moving. Ursula finally snaps, telling Buendia to give up his delusions. That night, Buendia has a wild dream about a bustling city sprouting from the ground, full of buildings with mirrored walls. A spooky voice whispers its name, Macondo. This strange name hits Buendia like a ton of bricks. He calls off the sea hunt and declares they're establishing a home here. In this place, he says, they'll write their own destiny. Just like that, with a few choice words, he paints a picture so pretty everyone decides to stick around. Buendia maps out streets, lays down the law, and before you know it, houses are popping up left and right. Over time, a lively little town takes shape. Buendia's son Jose grows into a mischievous kid, often tagging along with his old man to catch pretty birds and listen to their tunes. The bird songs attract some unexpected visitors, a band of musical gypsies. Their leader, Melquiades, claims he's hauling the eighth wonder of the wise men's world all the way from who knows where, alchemy. He has his crew bust out 2 wooden crates and pulls out 2 black square rocks. In a hot second, all the metal stuff nearby starts dancing like it's got a mind of its own. The Macondo folks are floored. These backwoods folks have never seen a magnet before and think Melquiades is working some voodoo. But Buendia, always thinking outside the box, sees dollar signs. He's ready to trade the family's last 2 goats for these magic rocks, ignoring Ursula's protests. When Melquiades hears Buendia's planning to use the magnets to strike gold, he breaks the bad news that magnets can't attract precious metals. But Buendia's convinced that while a tiny gold ring might not budge, a whopping gold deposit would be a different story.
No se la puedo vender para ese fin, créame. Déjeme que yo lo compruebe.
Melquiades is impressed by Buendia's go-getter attitude and agrees to the deal. Buendia and 2 buddies spend a week combing the mountains until the magnet finally reacts. He hollers for his friends, but all they dig up is a busted old suit of armor. Buendia can't help but laugh at his own foolishness, and he drags his tired bones home. Ursula, though, demands he get those goats back. She's pregnant and needs the nutrition. Buendia can't argue with that, so he swallows his pride and goes to see Melquiades. Surprisingly, Melquiades is a real stand-up guy. He not only gives back the goats, but throws in some extra goodies, an astrolabe, compass, sextant, and more. He's taken a shine to this young friend of his. Buendia is a mix of reckless and decisive, self-centered yet stubborn, with a head full of crazy ideas and an insatiable curiosity about the world. He's got adventure in his blood, and Melquiades is more than happy to show him the ropes. Buendia hears the word science for the first time and dives headfirst into this brave new world. Day in and day out, he's stargazing, mapping, and itching to find a road to civilization. Buendia sets off on another adventure, but doesn't get far before stumbling upon an old shipwreck. He figures the ocean must be just around the corner and picks up the pace. In a twist of fate that feels like a cosmic joke, it turns out Macondo and the sea are only separated by a patch of woods. If they'd pushed on for just half a day back then, they would have hit their dream destination. While Buendia's lost in thought, he gets the bright idea to connect Macondo with the outside world. He's planning an even longer expedition to beef up his maps. But Ursula's had it up to here with him, neglecting the family. Plus, their unborn kid starts crying at night, as if trying to keep Buendia home. Soon after, Ursula nervously gives birth to their second son, Aureliano. She breathed a huge sigh of relief when she saw his smooth, totally normal butt. But Aureliano's weird pre-birth omens were a sign of things to come. This kid wasn't your average Joe. Every now and then, he'd show off the power of prophecy.
Mamá, la olla se va a caer.
Está bien puesta, Aureliano.
As Aureliano grows up, his weird abilities start to fade. Meanwhile, Buendia stays nose-deep in his science gadgets every day. He gets this crazy idea to make solar-powered weapons out of glass and sell them to the army. One day, Buendia hears some familiar tunes. Melquiades and his gypsy crew are back in Macondo. Stoked to see his old buddy, Buendia invites Melquiades over right away. Melquiades is blown away by Buendia's scientific progress and brings him a special gift, alchemy. He gets all hush-hush, saying if you can control these elements just right, you can squeeze gold out of them. Buendia is over the moon, feeling like he's just unlocked a whole new level. From then on, Buendia holds up every day, obsessing over alchemy and dreaming of striking it rich overnight. Ursula gets fed up with his antics. She's left holding the bag for everything at home. She has to team up with her friends to make and sell candy at the market just to keep food on the table. Buendia's 2 boys grow up, each with their own quirks. Aureliano's psychic mojo is hit or miss, while Jose is built like a tank. The kid can wrestle wild boars with his bare hands. With their parents distracted, the boys run wild, causing havoc all over town. When Buendia secretly melts down their last gold coins for his alchemy experiments, Ursula finally loses it and tears into him.
Sin nada por esta casa, sino que tienes el descaro de acabar con lo poco que nos queda, de tus hijos que están abandonados a la buena de Dios. Van como salvajes, míralo.
Seeing his sons looking like little cavemen, Buendia realizes he's dropped the ball as a dad. He puts his research on hold and starts teaching the boys to read and write, sharing the wonders of the world with them. Just when things seem to be getting back on track, Ursula accidentally walks in on their older son in his birthday suit. She's frozen in shock at the ridiculously large organ. Her panicked reaction catches her friend Pilar's attention.
Tiene un miembro descomunal.
Pilar laughs it off, thinking it's no big deal. After all, Ursula's son is growing up, but Ursula still worries that her inbreeding might have caused her son's abnormality. Pilar reassures her and offers to do a tarot reading for her son. Pilar lays out a tarot deck in front of Jose, telling him to relax and pick 3 cards. But when she sees the results, her expression suddenly turns serious.
Que vas a ser indomable como un vendaval.
Jose feels pretty smug about this, but just then, Pilar suddenly reaches under the table. Jose instantly feels a jolt, like he's been electrocuted, leaving him weak.
Qué bárbaro.
The moment is broken when Ursula walks in. Pilar tells her that Jose won't have to worry about women or offspring in the future. Ursula finally relaxes, unaware that her son's fate has just been completely altered. That night, Jose can't stop thinking about that strange feeling. He's all hot and bothered, tossing and turning in bed. He sneaks out of the house and, as if possessed, heads towards Pilar's place. In the darkness, a hand grabs Jose. Pilar seems to have expected him. On this not-so-quiet night, Jose becomes a real man, and Pilar experiences unparalleled pleasure. The next day, clueless Ursula asks Pilar to look after her 2 sons. Jose and Pilar secretly hold hands, enjoying this fresh and exciting feeling. But Aureliano notices something off about his brother. He realizes Jose often leaves his room at night, only returning just before dawn. After persistent questioning, Jose spills the beans. Although Aureliano is young, he's curious about the amazing experiences his brother describes.
Tú no sabes todas las cosas que se pueden hacer con la lengua, Aureliano. Te sorprenderías, como un temblor de tierra.
Meanwhile, Buendia has no idea his eldest son has gone astray. He's still absorbed in his inventions and creations. He finally succeeds in developing a solar-powered weapon. It can focus the sun's energy to ignite distant objects. Buendia and his family are thrilled, and even Ursula slightly changes her attitude towards his research. Suddenly, familiar music fills the air. The Gypsy caravan has returned to Macondo. Buendia excitedly takes his sons to watch the acrobatics show, as these gypsies always bring something new. After paying 30 reales, Buendia sees a massive ice-cold stone. He's never seen ice before and thinks it's a diamond. He pays another 5 reales just to touch it. The icy sensation is unlike anything he's ever felt, but his main goal is to see his old friend Melquiades, so he asks an old man performing an invisibility trick.
Melquiades murió en los médanos de Singapur.
Buendia feels like the world is spinning. Before he can ask more, the old man vanishes in a puff of black smoke, along with the other gypsies. At that moment, Buendia's world seems to empty out. He returns to his lab, devastated, deeply missing the man who introduced him to the world of science. The best way to honor Melquiades, he decides, is to keep the alchemy he brought alive. That night, Ursula suddenly goes into labor. With Buendia holed up in his lab, Ursula gives birth to a baby girl on her own. She still fears the inbreeding curse, but luckily, the baby doesn't have a tail, as the whole family celebrates the new arrival. Buendia finally emerges from his lab. He proudly shows off his alchemical achievement. He's extracted gold from an alloy, but Jose voices a different opinion.
Parece mierda de perro.
Buendia, furious, slaps him. This slap changes Jose's fate. Full of resentment, he runs away to seek comfort from Pilar. He's tired of spending all day in the land with his father and would rather be with Pilar. They stroll through the market arm in arm like a couple, watching the flying carpet in the sky. That's when Pilar sweetly shares a surprise with Jose.
Vas a tener un hijo.
Jose is scared out of his wits. He's still living under his father's protection and never imagined becoming a father himself. He chooses to avoid reality, forcing himself not to think about what's coming. That night, unable to sleep, Jose goes to the night market to clear his head. A shapely gypsy girl catches his eye. With just one look, they end up having an intimate encounter. It's not until the next morning that Ursula realizes he was missing. She hurriedly takes Aureliano to search for him. After hearing from neighbors that Jose was with a gypsy girl last night, Ursula rushes to the gypsy camp. But the caravan has left, and Jose has gone with them to see the colorful world outside. Ursula sends Aureliano to tell his father while she plunges into the forest to search for Jose. However, Even after Buendia and the neighbors search for 3 days and nights, there's no trace of Jose, and Ursula has vanished too. The once lively courtyard suddenly becomes desolate. The task of caring for the baby girl falls to Buendia, but he remains obsessed with his alchemy research. Aureliano often helps with his experiments. 5 months later, while fiddling with a telescope, Aureliano suddenly spots a familiar figure. He quickly calls his father to look, confirming it's his long-lost mother. It turns out Ursula, while searching for Jose, stumbled upon a town on the other side of the swamp. She's returned with many skilled immigrants. Sadly, she still couldn't find Jose. Buendia is relieved. Ursula has fulfilled his unfinished wish, connecting Macondo to the outside world. They also gain 2 servants for their household. Just as the Buendia family is basking in the joy of reunion, Pilar suddenly shows up with a baby. Ursula struggles to accept that her friend had a secret affair with her son and gave her a grandson. Buendia, sensing the shared bloodline, feels compassion. Ursula agrees to adopt the baby, but sets conditions.
Entonces esta puta no vuelve a poner un pie en esta casa. Y ese niño no va a saber quién lo parió.
So the Buendia family grows by 1 more. Buendia names his grandson Arcadio after his father Jose Arcadio. Aureliano, still melancholy over losing his brother, shuts himself in the lab, immersed in silversmithing. Arcadio and his aunt Amaranta grow up as close playmates. Aureliano loses his boyish looks and regains the intense gaze he had at birth. It seems his ability to foresee the future has returned.
¿Alguien va a venir?
This is the creepiest girl in 100 years of Solitude. She carries a sack around with her. And get this, it's filled with her parents' bones. 2 leather merchants brought her to Macondo in a donkey cart. They also delivered a letter saying she's Buendia's distant cousin, Rebeca. Ursula, feeling sorry for her, decides to take her in. But no matter what she asks, Rebeca just keeps on rocking. They have no idea that Rebeca's about to become the town's worst nightmare. Ursula settles Rebeca in her daughter Amaranta's room. Curious Amaranta opens Rebeca's sack. Even weirder, Rebeca refuses to eat a single bite. She silently grabs the wriggling sack and heads back to her room. At night, she doesn't sleep, just sits in the rocking chair, rocking non-stop. The other kids are freaked out. Aureliano, though, realizes Rebeca is the visitor he foresaw 3 months ago. The next morning at breakfast, Rebeca, who hasn't eaten for a whole day, just stares at her bowl without moving. Buendia tries to convince her to try Macondo's best yam porridge, but she pushes the bowl away. Ursula finally loses her patience and threatens Rebeca, saying she can't leave the table until she eats. But Rebeca is surprisingly stubborn. Ursula's furious. She orders the servants to take away Rebeca's sack and puts her in timeout. Come nighttime, Rebeca suddenly jumps out of bed and runs off. Curious Amaranta follows her to the courtyard and sees a bizarre scene. Rebeca's crouching on the ground, shoving handfuls of dirt into her mouth. Soon, the whole family is shocked by Rebeca's behavior. Ursula carefully tries to stop her, but finally, at dawn, the Buendia family manages to catch Rebeca and tie her to a chair. Ursula tries to force medicine down her throat, but as Rebeca struggles fiercely, she suddenly starts talking. Ursula doesn't get angry. Rebeca throwing a tantrum seems more like a normal kid. She tells Rebeca in a gentle voice that she'll let her go if she just takes 1 sip. Rebeca finally obeys, but then her stomach makes a rumbling noise, and she lets out an earth-shaking burp.
Gracias, mamá.
Mi niña.
Just like that, Rebeca's back to normal. It's like she's a different person. Lively, cheerful, and can't stop talking. She quickly becomes part of the family, and Ursula's favorite. This makes Amaranta jealous. She even considers throwing her food bowl like Rebeca used to.
Hazlo.
However, that night, 2 servants are woken up by a mysterious creaking sound. They find Rebeca back in the rocking chair, rocking away. They think she's sleepwalking, but then the maid recognizes this as a strange illness called the insomnia plague. She immediately starts performing rituals to ward off evil spirits. The male servant, scared out of his wits, runs away in the middle of the night. But the Buendia family doesn't take it seriously. They don't believe in a contagious disease that could keep people awake forever. Meanwhile, Rebeca secretly dips her finger in syrup to eat sugar, but the servant stops her right away. Ursula thinks the servant is too superstitious and continues to make candy with the syrup Rebeca touched, selling it at the market. Ursula's candy has always been popular. The people of Macondo love it. However, after eating the candy, people gradually become more and more energetic, and by nightfall, no one feels sleepy at all. At first, everyone enjoys this state, thinking they'll have more time for work and play. Macondo briefly turns into a bustling town that never sleeps. But as time goes on, the downsides of not sleeping start to show. Buendia suddenly realizes that everyone's memory is starting to fade uncontrollably. They can't even remember the names of tools they use every day. To deal with the memory loss, Aureliano comes up with a clever idea, labeling everything. But this solution doesn't last long either. People forget not just the names of things, but also their concepts. Eventually, they'll forget how to read too. Buendia realizes things are out of control when his friend forgets who he is. Women even mistake their husbands for dirty old men sneaking into bed. The whole town falls into chaos. People forget ethics and morals, becoming almost crazy. The insomnia is stripping away people's self-awareness. If this continues, all of Macondo will be destroyed. In this crisis, an old man with white hair arrives in Macondo. It's Buendia's dead friend Melquiades, who's returned to the world of the living because he couldn't stand the loneliness. But Buendia doesn't recognize him anymore. Melquiades immediately goes to the alchemy lab to make a potion. Buendia drinks it and regains his senses. But the next moment, he falls into a deep sleep. Then, Melquiades gives a spoonful of the potion to everyone else. Finally, the whole town is filled with the sound of snoring, driving away the terrifying insomnia plague. Time flies, and Buendia's getting on in years. Melquiades sticks around to witness the family's fate enter a new cycle. Aureliano's grown up, but he's still the quiet type, spending his days cooped up in the lab. Rebeca's turned into a real beauty, with flawless skin and mesmerizing eyes. Amaranta's plain-looking, but has a graceful, ladylike air about her. As for Arcadio, he's built strong and rugged like his dad, Jose. Melquiades whips up a camera and wants to snap a family photo of the Buendias. Ursula's not having it, refusing to be in the picture, cause she doesn't want her middle age spread on record. She sends Arcadio off to change clothes, getting him out of the way. Arcadio's bummed about missing the photo op. He never quite feels like he fits in with the family. Even though they're blood related, he still doesn't know who his parents are. The old guard's about to exit stage left, while the young guns are bursting with hormones. Aureliano's buddies always rag on him for being a virgin, and he's starting to cave under the pressure. In a moment of weakness, he hands over his chemistry supply money to a madam. Aureliano, all nervous, pushes open the door, only to be greeted by a baby-faced girl. When he learns she'll be servicing 70 clients a day for the next decade to pay off her debt, he's shell-shocked. His mood for fun evaporates instantly.
Para.
He leaves all his cash and splits, feeling all kinds of messed up. His weird sixth sense tells him to steer clear of women. But little does he know, his love life's about to take off. Rebeca and Amaranta are like flowers ready to bloom, thirsting for love. Seeing her daughter's alluring figures, Ursula realizes it's high time they got hitched. She dips into her savings to renovate and expand the house. The whole family's bustling with activity again, like old times. Meanwhile, Buendia's gone camera crazy. He's obsessed with this gadget that can freeze time, snapping pics all over Macondo. He gets this wild idea. Could the camera capture God on film? To throw a dance, Ursula special orders a piano from the big city. Along comes Pietro, the piano player. Rebeca and Amaranta are instantly smitten with this dashing, fashionable gentleman. This chance encounter kicks off years of emotional drama between the three of them. Pietro offers to teach the girls to dance as a bonus for buying the piano. Ursula wants to say no, but can't resist her daughter's pleading, so she lays down some rules. Arcadio has to chaperone.
Ni nada de tocarse.
Por supuesto.
But once the music starts, Ursula's words go in one ear and out the other. The music draws in Buendia too. Watching the keys jump on their own, he is convinced God's hiding inside this big box.
¿Estás viendo?
¿Qué cosa?
Su honra.
Pues no sabes qué inventar para andarte preocupando, ¿verdad? Tipo es marica.
A week later, Pietro leaves. He takes Amaranta and Rebeca's hearts with him. But sisters falling for the same guy? That's a recipe for disaster. At night, Buendia tears the piano apart. Even in middle age, his curiosity's off the charts. Ursula's fuming because she's throwing a dance tomorrow to find suitable husbands for her daughters. Buendia manages to fix the piano, just in the nick of time before the party starts. All the old-timers who founded Macondo with Buendia show up, along with their love-struck kids. Rebeca's dancing on autopilot, daydreaming that her partner's morphed into Pietro. When she snaps out of it, she bolts. In the backyard veggie patch, she's back to her childhood habit of shoving dirt in her mouth to keep her loneliness and anxiety at bay. Just as the party's heating up, a letter arrives from the Colombian government demanding that Macondo's residents paint their houses blue to show support for the Conservative Party. Plus, they're sending a magistrate named Mascot to run things in Macondo. Buendia's livid.
¿Quién carajo es Apolinar Moscote?
No way is he letting politics tame Macondo or letting an outsider call the shots. Faced with the angry Macondo mob, Mascot coolly whips out his government-issued appointment papers, but Buendia couldn't care less about that bureaucratic nonsense, so Mascot goes for his gun to threaten them. The townspeople kindly escort the magistrate out of town, but he's not backing down. Before long, he's back in Macondo with his whole family and all their stuff, plus a squad of soldiers. Looks like Macondo's years of peace are about to get shaken up. And there, sitting in the back of the wagon, is a girl who catches Aureliano's eye as he passes by. It's like she's stolen his soul in an instant. The girl's so lovesick she's back to eating fistfuls of dirt every night. Meanwhile, her brother just catches a glimpse of this pretty girl and suddenly sees himself with 17 kids in the future. From that moment on, Aureliano can't think about anything else. He tries to drown his feelings in booze, drinking until he feels like he's floating on air. In his half-drunk state, a woman comes to him. Aureliano's passion ignites instantly. He lets his instincts take over, not realizing the woman is Pilar, the fortune teller who had a kid with his brother Jose. Aureliano thinks it's all a dream and stumbles away. He gets up the courage to tell his parents about his feeling.
Estoy enamorado.
But when he says the girl's name is Remedios, Buendia clams up. Remedios is the daughter of the government-sent magistrate. As Macondo's founder, Buendia won't let politics taint his utopia. The magistrate, who Buendia had kicked out, is back with an army. The tension's so thick you could cut it with a knife. Buendia and his wife are worried sick, not just about their son falling for the enemy's daughter, but also about their lovesick daughter Rebeca. Even though Buendia and the magistrate are at each other's throats, Ursula and the magistrate's wife hit it off. She invites the magistrate's wife over. The magistrate's oldest daughter sneaks Rebeca a letter from Pietro, the piano player she's been pining for. Amaranta sees this and jealousy starts eating away at her. Remedios accidentally wanders into Aureliano's lab and right into his heart.
Qué lindo. ¿Lo hizo usted?
Te lo regalo.
Gracias.
Suddenly, the whole house is buzzing with love. Rebeca's so excited about Pietro's letter she can't sleep. His sweet words drive her wild, and she writes back just as passionately. They keep this secret correspondence going, both sweet and thrilling. When Pietro suddenly stops writing, Rebeca's a mess. Her extreme longing and anxiety bring back her dirt-eating habit. Her brother Aureliano's suffering too, scribbling his love's name all over his room. Even when Rebeca's bedridden with illness, she's still clutching Pietro's old letters. That's when Ursula finally figures out what's going on.
Te quiero.
Yo también te quiero.
Hearing Rebeca and Pietro's mushy love talk, Amaranta's heartbroken. She locks herself in the bathroom and starts hurting herself. Ursula realizes something's wrong and checks Amaranta's room, finding a bunch of unsent love letters. Turns out Amaranta's been in love with Pietro too. Stuck in unrequited love, Ursula regrets ever buying that damn piano. Even though she angrily burns all the letters, it doesn't stop what's coming. Finally, Buendia and Ursula give in, agreeing to let their kids marry who they want. This works better than any medicine. Rebeca's instantly cured and happily writes to Pietro with the good news. Meanwhile, Amaranta's seething with hatred for her sister. Soon after, Buendia and Ursula take their son to propose to the magistrate's family. When they hear Aureliano wants to marry their youngest daughter, the magistrate and his wife look shocked. After all, Remedios is still underage. Buendia and Ursula are embarrassed. They had no idea their son was into that. Ursula and the magistrate's wife decide to wait until Remedios is old enough to conceive before letting her marry Aureliano. Surprisingly, the magistrate agrees easily, but has one condition.
¿Se casan por la iglesia o no hay matrimonio?
Macondo siempre ha sido un pueblo laico.
Before Buendia can refuse, Aureliano jumps at the offer. Buendia knows the magistrate's trying to use religion to mess with Macondo's people's minds and break their will to resist. But Aureliano's too love-drunk to realize this. Feeling like he's losing his grip, Buendia vents to his old pal Melquiades. Melquiades is on his last legs and tells Buendia how to bring him back to life. The next day, Arcadio takes Melquiades to the river for a bath, but in the blink of an eye, Melquiades vanishes. Buendia and his friends search all night along the river, finally finding Melquiades drowned downstream. Buendia is convinced Melquiades is immortal. He follows Melquiades' instructions, earning mercury by his body for 3 days and nights, but no miracle happens.
Arcadio, para. Ya es hora de que descanse en paz, Melquiades. Por favor.
Time has stopped, and eternity has begun. Buendia mumbles as he buries his old friend. Maybe that crow carried off Melquiades' soul, letting him rest peacefully in these quiet fields, long after everyone else has left. Arcadio's still kneeling at the grave. Melquiades' care had filled the hole left by his missing parents, but now he's alone again. Pilar hugs him, comforting him, but Arcadio doesn't know she's his mother. While some are grieving, others are celebrating. Pietro's back in Macondo to marry Rebeca. They're all lovey-dovey, making Amaranta sick with jealousy. Pietro tries to comfort her, promising to set her up with his brother, but this just twists the knife in her heart.
Juro que nunca te vas a casar con mi hermana. Así tengas que atravesar en la puerta mi propio cadáver.
Ursula overhears Amaranta's threats and realizes her worst fears are coming true. To keep Amaranta from doing something crazy, Ursula decides to take her on a trip to clear her head. Before they leave, Amaranta still snaps at Rebeca. Her hatred born from unrequited love sets the stage for the tragedy to come. Rebeca's unsettled by her sister's words and goes to Pilar for fortune-telling. The death card appears, meaning endings, changes, and new beginnings. Rebeca will find happiness, but the road there will be rocky.
Llegará como un vendaval y te revolcará la vida.
With his friend gone and his wife and daughter away, Buendia gets more and more depressed. Rebeca's always with Pietro. Aureliano's busy teaching his little fiancé, and Buendia, feeling ignored, shuts himself in his lab to pass the time. The wind-up toys Pietro brought inspire him to try making a perpetual motion machine. He throws himself into it like he did with alchemy when he was young, but it doesn't work out. Buendia's contraption runs for 3 days before stopping, and his time seems to stop at that moment too.
¿Qué día es hoy?
Jueves.
Sigue siendo lunes. La máquina del tiempo se ha averiado.
In a daze, Buendia sees the ghost of Aguilar, the man he killed when he was young. Melquiades' death was the first in Macondo since it was founded. Aguilar, following the scent of death, has found his way here. Time has worn away their old grudges, and now they're like old friends heading home together. Buendia's mind is completely gone, and madness follows. He suddenly has terrifying strength, and his family can't control him. It takes all the neighbors working together to restrain him, and they have no choice but to tie him to the old tree in the courtyard. When Ursula returns from her trip and opens the door, she sees her husband, foolish and dejected. Tears fill her eyes instantly. Choking back sobs, she unties the ropes around Buendia's feet, trying to make him more comfortable. Time is so cruel. The once passionate, determined young leader has faded into history. The glory of the first generation of the Buendia family comes to an end, while the twisted tales of the second and third generations are just beginning.
Mamá, me voy a morir.
When the girl gets her first period, her family immediately dresses her in a beautiful wedding gown. As agreed, once Remedios is old enough to conceive, she's to marry Aureliano. Aureliano's sister, Rebeca, was supposed to get married too, but her fiancé Pietro got called back home by a letter saying his mother was on her deathbed. That night, the whole Buendia house suddenly starts shaking. Curious, Ursula heads to Rebeca's room. She's shocked to find her daughter violently pleasuring herself, unable to satisfy her desires. That's what caused the earthquake. The next day, the magistrate and his women folk bring the bride to the Buendia house in a grand procession. Since Macondo's church isn't built yet, the priest makes an exception and comes to the Buendia house to perform the wedding. But when they're exchanging rings, Aureliano's ring suddenly slips from his hand. It's a bad omen. His marriage is doomed to end in tragedy. While everyone's celebrating the wedding, Rebeca's the only one with a long face. She goes out for some air and runs into Pietro's mother, who just rushed over. Not only is she not sick, but she's excitedly asking when Rebeca's wedding is. Rebeca realizes she's been played. Amaranta must have faked that letter about the mother being sick to stop her wedding. Amaranta admits it without a care.
Era lo menos grave que podía hacer. La otra salida era matarte.
Meanwhile, Pietro's on his way back to Macondo, passing his mother who's heading home. Rebeca wants to get married right away while the priest is still there, but Pietro can't accept a wedding without his mother present.
Te vamos a estar encima tutta la vita. È solo questione di tempo.
Their intimate behavior makes Amaranta burn with jealousy. Remedios' arrival is like a breath of fresh air in the Buendia house. Remedios is kind-hearted and cheerful, getting along well with everyone in the family. She even treats the outcast Arcadio like everyone else. The whole house is filled with her youthful energy, and her beauty and noble character are flawless. But good times are always short, and dark clouds gather unexpectedly. Pillar shows up at the Buendia's door with a baby, just like she did over a decade ago. But last time, it was Jose's love child. This time, it's Jose's brothers. That night of drunken indulgence has come back to bite Aureliano. But unlike his brother, Aureliano doesn't run away. He steps up to be a father. When he hands the baby to Remedios to care for, Ursula is furious. One loved child in the family was shameful enough, and now Aureliano's brought in another, asking his newlywed wife to raise it. But her attitude also sparks Aureliano's anger.
Porque escúchame bien, Úrsula y Guarán. Jamás te voy a permitir que lo trate de la misma manera que trataste a Arcadio.
Turns out Aureliano's always resented how his mother neglected Arcadio, and he doesn't want history to repeat itself. He comes clean to his father-in-law, but surprisingly, the magistrate isn't angry. He says as long as the baby is baptized by the priest and its parentage is kept secret, everything will be fine. Clearly, the magistrate hasn't given up on integrating religion into Macondo, subtly changing the residents' will. Watching this, Arcadio is envious and jealous. He's a love child too, but he never got such treatment. At the party, Rebeca asks the priest when he can officiate her wedding. Amaranta suggests, with fake sincerity, that she wait until the church is built.
No!
But Rebeca can't wait that long. The church will take at least 3 years to build. She can't understand why her brother could have a home wedding, but she can't.
A cuenta de que tú en esta casa se volvieron go de la noche a la mañana.
The truth is often hard to hear. Their family has gradually been influenced and infiltrated by the conservative magistrate.
¿Qué fue lo que dijiste?
Que todos se volvieron go de la noche.
Even though Ursula doesn't want to admit it, she plans to follow the priest's request and wait for the church to be built. Little does she know, this decision will completely change the Buendia family's fate. The magistrate offers Arcadio a job as principal of the town school. He noticed Arcadio's an outcast in the family and tries to win him over to build his influence in Macondo. Arcadio's sick of his family's cold shoulder and decides to leave. This act of rebellion sets the stage for his ridiculous and tragic fate. Eager to get married, Rebeca checks on the church construction daily like a taskmaster, but progress is slow due to lack of funds. To raise donations, the priest even starts holding outdoor masses. After drinking a cup of scalding hot chocolate, he starts demonstrating miracles. The audience is amazed when they see him floating in midair, but Buendia scoffs at this.
Como este cuarto en materia statu invenit.
Factum hoc existentiam Dei probat sine dubio.
Ne credam artifici eius.
Though Buendia's got mad, his words still carry weight. Seeing the audience disperse, the priest tells Ursula that at the current fundraising rate, it might take 10 years to build the church. Losing patience, Rebeca thinks about eloping with Pietro, but Pietro's just invested everything in opening a music store in town. Eloping now would mean bankruptcy. Rebeca's about to lose it. That night, another violent earthquake hits the house, accompanied by weird gasping sounds. Rebeca can no longer suppress her bodily desires and has to release them with her hands. The erupting hormones seem about to bring down the whole house. Old Buendia laughs maniacally, as if mocking his family's repeated stupid decisions. The only good news is that Remedios is pregnant. Aureliano's strange foresight tells him his wife is carrying twins. This news lightens the gloomy atmosphere in the house, and even Rebeca and Amaranta call a temporary truce. They compete to knit clothes for the unborn babies. But every night, the house still shakes, each time more violently than the last. Rebeca seems to be at her limit, tortured by pent-up passion, and Ursula's sense of shame and patience are also at their limit. She goes to the priest in the middle of the night with a large donation.
Rebeca tiene que estar parada en el altar antes de que el mes termine.
Learning she can have her wedding by the end of the month, Rebeca instantly regains her old energy. But the happier Rebeca is, the more resentful Amaranta becomes. At night, she sneaks into Buendia's alchemy lab to steal potions. The love she can't have, no one else should either, not even her sister. Arcadio's mind is also twisted. Every time Pilar comes to pick up her child from school, her gaze holds a special emotion that stirs something in Arcadio. Tragically, he doesn't realize that Pilar's eyes show parental love, not romantic interest. So Arcadio and his unknown father end up falling for the same woman. It's utterly absurd. One day, he makes an excuse to call Pilar into his office. About to be alone with her son, Pilar feels a bit excited, but what greets her is a beast full of lust. To escape, Pilar promises to come back that evening for a secret rendezvous. At night, Arcadio thinks Pilar has tricked him, but suddenly the door opens. He pounces like a hungry wolf, but quickly realizes something's off. It's not Pilar, but a young girl. Pilar sent her as a substitute, spending half her life savings. This is Pilar's way of making amends to her son, and the price she pays for her wild and lustful past. Amaranto's karma finally catches up with her. The poison she meant for Rebeca is accidentally consumed by Remedios. Watching his wife struggle in agony, covered in blood, Aureliano panics and calls for help, but his heartbroken cries can't save Remedios' life or the babies in her womb. Amaranta is full of regret and adopts Aureliano's love child to atone. She's destined for eternal loneliness. The light in silversmith Aureliano's eyes goes out, and Colonel Aureliano, who will fight across the country, is about to emerge. Grief-stricken, Ursula closes all the doors and windows in the house and bans loud talking for a year. Just as the whole family is sinking into a cloud of sorrow, a violent wind suddenly sweeps through the house. Following it is a bald, muscular man. Ursula recognizes him immediately as her eldest son, Jose, who ran away years ago, Arcadio's father. His determined gaze and wild, powerful physique exude masculinity. The Buendia house shook again after a long time. Yet, Rebeca's heart was all stirred up once more. The girl peeks through the door crack at her brother's shower. His ripped body and bulging muscles are all hot and bothered. Rebeca's got good taste. Jose had a huge equipment since he was a kid, even freaking out his mom. After knocking up Pilar, Jose got scared and ran off, joining a bunch of sailors without a country. They sailed around the world 65 times before a shipwreck left Jose the lone survivor. Now he's grown mature and macho, downing 20 raw eggs for breakfast and oozing confidence. Jose's impressive physique soon causes a stir at the nightclubs. Girls throw money at him for a night of fun, and he's raking in more cash than the top prostitute. Rebeca's head over heels for him. In comparison, her fiancé Pietro looks like a sugary dandy. Just a glance at Jose gets Rebeca all worked up, even driving her back to her old dirt-eating habit to cope. She walks into Jose's room as if possessed, and they go at it like rabbits all night long. For the first time, Rebeca manages to thank God for having been born. The next morning, they're making googly eyes at each other without a care, and Jose drops a bombshell announcement.
Me caso con Rebeca.
No digas pendeja.
No estamos pidiendo permiso.
Ursula's shocked and pissed, threatening to kick them out if they get hitched.
Perfecto. El que quiera venir está invitado.
Before leaving, they throw some shade at the stunned family. Amaranta's the most ticked off. Rebeca always gets the guy she wants, and it's driving Amaranta crazy with jealousy. She tears up and burns all of Rebeca's clothes, her anger burning hotter than the flames. Meanwhile, Jose struts into Pietro's music class to tell him he's not Rebeca's fiancé anymore.
Sí, po. Es contra natura.
Me cago 2 veces en natura.
Pietro's heartbroken, but can't do anything about it. 3 days later, Jose and Rebeca tie the knot in church with the priest's blessing. After all, they're not blood relatives. Only Aureliano from the Buendia family shows up to celebrate. Arcadio stands there, grinning like an idiot, still clueless that Jose's his dad. Pilar watches from afar, maybe reminiscing about her steamy nights with Jose years ago. The newlyweds rent a place near the cemetery, with nothing but a hammock to their name. The townsfolk can only pray their earth-shaking lovemaking doesn't disturb the dead. Ursula feels bad for Pietro getting dumped, so she invites him for lunch every Tuesday. With Amaranta's tender loving care, he soon gets over his heartbreak. Pietro feels he's found true love. He works up the courage to confess his feelings, and Amaranta's eyes are full of hope. But when Pietro pops the question with a diamond ring, she turns him down.
Y si de verdad me quieres, Pietro, no vuelvas a pisar esta casa.
Pietro is totally confused, thinking he wasn't sincere enough, so he grabs his harp and stands outside the Buendia house, pouring his heart out in song. His angelic voice moves young girls and lovey-dovey couples. But it can't soften Amaranta's stubbornness. Ursula opens the door, but can only shake her head at Pietro's all-night vigil. Pietro's face turns ashen. He spills his blood on the black and white keys he's loved all his life, dying in despair and loneliness. Instead of a wedding blessing from the priest, he gets last rites. Amaranta's heart is once again filled with guilt. She presses her right hand on a hot stove to atone, proving she's not heartless. Amaranta rejected Pietro not to get back at him, but because of Remedio's death. Accepting Pietro would mean her happiness came from an innocent person's death. That would haunt her forever. But Ursula doesn't know this and is completely disappointed in her daughter. From then on, Amaranta pours all her energy into her brother's love child, but their close relationship leads the little nephew to develop different feelings for her.
¿Puedo quedar esta noche contigo?
Tienes que acostumbrarte a dormir solo.
Es la última vez, te lo prometo.
Está bien.
While the Buendia family is going through all this drama, Macondo's fate is about to change. The magistrate barges into the bar with his guards, announcing Macondo's first election. There's a curfew starting every night until then. They go door to door, confiscating weapons, even taking kitchen knives. Macondo's people are freaking out, and everyone's pissed. Turns out the ruling Conservative Party and the Liberal Party are at each other's throats. And word is the Liberals are planning a revolution during the election. The magistrate tries to get his son-in-law Aureliano to join the Conservatives, but Aureliano couldn't care less about politics. His nephew Arcadio, though, is already caught up in this mess, joining the underground liberal organization in Macondo.
Bienvenido a la revolución.
To drum up votes, they sneak in a printing press and start handing out flyers to Macondo's residents. Almost all the descendants of Macondo's founders support or join them. Fed up with the Conservatives' harsh policies, Arcadio's school becomes a secret meeting spot for the liberals. His humble beginnings and feeling left out have made him unhappy with the status quo, and the leader's fiery speeches really stir up his rebellious side.
¡Vamos a votar con dignidad y valentía!
The next day, the election kicks off. Everyone voting Liberal downs a bottle of medicine as a secret signal. This way, the Liberals can count their votes early. No surprise, the Liberal votes are way ahead, but the magistrate orders the results flipped. This blatant cheating leaves Aureliano stunned.
Si yo fuera liberal, eso sería una razón para ir a la guerra.
Hombre, Aurelito, si tú fueras liberal, aunque fuera mi yerno.
The Liberals soon find out about the vote tampering, and it's not just in Macondo, it's happening all over the country. They're furious and ready to fight back with violence. Aureliano's disgusted by the Conservatives' dirty tricks too, and his friends convince him to think about joining the Liberals. But the Liberals aren't as righteous and civilized as they seem. They're planning a massacre of Conservative officials and their families. They even want Aureliano to kill his father-in-law, the magistrate, and his 6 daughters.
Usted no es ni revolucionario. Usted lo que es un matarife. Eso es lo que es usted.
Aureliano doesn't want to team up with these terrorists masquerading as a political party, so he leaves disappointed. Before the Liberals can start their revolt, the Conservative National Army sneaks into Macondo. They kick out the sleeping Arcadio and his wife, taking over the school as their barracks. The next day, they arrest the Liberal leaders without explanation. When the priest tries to intervene, they beat him up. Aureliano can't stand this brutality and goes to ask his father-in-law to stop the executions, but the magistrates lost his power once the government declares a state of emergency. The army takes control of all towns, so the army publicly executes the liberal leaders to scare Macondo's residents. Then they go on a witch hunt for liberal members, preferring to kill innocents rather than let anyone escape. After seeing an innocent woman beaten to death in the street by soldiers, Aureliano's burning with rage. He doesn't want to get involved in politics, but he can't sit by and watch the conservatives brutalize Macondo's people. Packing up his gear and weapons, Aureliano quietly says goodbye to his father. Ignoring his mother's pleas, he sets off on the path of revolution. First, he tells his friends to gather people ready to take on the national army.
Prepárenlo, muchachos.
¿Qué arma?
Con la de ellos.
Then, he goes to the cemetery to invite Jose to join. But Jose's seen the cruelty of the outside world and just wants a quiet life with Rebeca. He tells his brother to make sure he comes back alive. At midnight, Aureliano and his crew quietly take out the soldiers guarding the school. He leads the charge into the school with the first gun they grabbed. The sleeping soldiers are caught off guard, totally defenseless against the armed rebels. Aureliano orders the execution of the officers and soldiers who've committed atrocities.
¡Honor y patria! ¡Mátenlo!
He's finally shed his indecisiveness, taking his first real step into the revolution. Arcadio wants to follow Aureliano, but Aureliano tells him to stay and be the civil and military commander. Macondo's without leadership now. Then he finds the magistrate hiding and shaking in a closet, telling him Macondo's been liberated.
Y usted a mí no me vuelve a llamar Aurelito. A partir de este momento, soy el coronel Aureliano Buendia.
The silversmith Aureliano has officially become Colonel Aureliano, ready to lead his comrades to join the liberal army. From this moment on, he embarks on his revolutionary journey, beginning his grand and glorious life. He puts on fake medals, straps on a sword, and slips into riding boots. The elementary school principal is trying to look like Napoleon from a picture in a book. The kids at school ditch their books and pick up guns. Colonel Aureliano told Arcadio to keep Macondo safe before he left, but Arcadio's letting it go to his head and acting like a little dictator. He gathers everyone in town and drops his first decree. All men have to join the army and wear red armbands for the Liberal Party, and every house has to be painted red. A lot of people aren't happy about this. It goes against Macondo's whole free, no party vibe they've had since day one. But Arcadio doesn't care. To show he's the boss, he has his students practice shooting in the street. These kids' soldiers are terrible shots though, and bullets are flying everywhere. People are freaking out and running back into their houses. All the laughing is making Arcadio look pretty stupid. Then, an old guy comes asking for help, and Arcadio perks up. Turns out, Jose's trying to force his neighbors to pay rent. Since getting hitched, Rebeca absorbed Jose's tremendous energy every day, but it's also made him stop chasing other women and start working hard. Macondo was built by old Buendia, and Jose, being the oldest son, thinks he owns the whole place, so he's demanding rent from the neighbors. Arcadio not only doesn't stop him, but makes it legal and takes a cut.
Y lo único que tienes que hacer para convertirte en el dueño de esas tierras es firmar aquí. Eso sí, vas a tener que pagar una pequeña contribución a nuestra oficina. Tranquilo, que solo puedes sacar lo que te produzca en el campo.
These two jerks are really alike, but they still don't know their father and son. To raise money for the army, Arcadio slaps heavy taxes on all the businesses. People put up with his antics because they respect his uncle, Colonel Aureliano. A trumpet player starts playing a goofy tune to make fun of Arcadio for acting like a clown playing dress-up, and everyone cracks up. When Arcadio realizes he's being mocked, Pilar's heartbroken seeing her son kill her friend. She's still paying for her wild and slutty past. Once Arcadio gets a taste of power, he goes totally off the rails. He arrests the ex-magistrate just for saying something snarky about him and plans to have him shot in public. Right before it happens, Ursula jumps in front of the magistrate. She's furious and whips the crap out of her jackass grandson. Arcadio's totally blindsided. Ursula just got a letter from the front lines saying Aureliano bit the dust. Without his backup, Arcadio deflates like a balloon, slinking away while people spit at him. Ursula's so torn up about losing her son, she can barely walk, but she doesn't know Aureliano's actually still kicking. there was a mix-up with the battle report. Since Aureliano freed Macondo with his 29 buddies, he's been on a mission to take down the conservative government. He's always at the front of the charge, somehow miraculously surviving close calls with death. During a mission to rescue a captured colonel deep in enemy territory, they're discovered and suffer heavy losses. Aureliano has to split and find allied forces for help. He asks a farmer for info, but the guy mistakes him for one of those nasty conservative soldiers.
Esto no es necesario.
He ditches his horse and runs for it, but ends up lost in the same swamp his folks crossed when they first came to Macondo. Exhausted, Aureliano hallucinates, seeing his dead wife and his dad as a young man. He finally collapses, face first in the mud, out cold. When he comes to, he's in a rundown shack. A kind farm woman saved him. Lucky for him, she's helped plenty of liberal soldiers before and quickly connects Aureliano with some backup. Colonel Stevenson, who's in charge, has heard all about Aureliano's heroics and immediately joins forces with him. But when Aureliano gets back to camp, he finds out all the wounded soldiers have been buried. Heartbroken, Aureliano realizes he has to win this war to stop the conservatives' nationwide bloodbath.
Hasta que no le reclamemos a esos hijos de puta. Hasta la última gota de sangre que hayan derramado los nuestros. ¡Viva el Partido Liberal!
After a rousing speech, Aureliano leads the charge straight into the enemy camp. Fighting for freedom, they're fearless and soon have the enemy on the run. Only this kind of hardcore action can break the back of exploitation and tyranny. Every second of peace hides a chunk of intense history, and every revolutionary monument is built on the bones of heroes. This is Colonel Aureliano fighting back against oppression and standing up for his people's suffering. While they're celebrating their big win, Aureliano's hometown, Macondo, is about to get hit hard. Pilar's fortune-telling shows her son's in deep trouble, so she rushes to warn Arcadio.
Una mujer intentará ayudarte. Tienes que escucharla.
But Arcadio's in a funk and ignores her advice. Ever since Ursula whipped him in public, Macondo's people have been looking down on him even more. He hasn't been able to collect a single penny in taxes. Pilar's prediction comes true fast when a woman bursts into Arcadio's office. Actually, it's Colonel Stevenson in drag, risking his life to deliver a message from Aureliano. A huge conservative army with big guns is about to attack Macondo, and the town's defenses don't stand a chance. Aureliano's telling them to surrender to avoid a massacre. But Arcadio, who just heard Aureliano was dead, doesn't buy it. He ignores Stevenson's warning and locks him up. Before Arcadio can even get comfortable, gunfire erupts outside. The conservative army's coming in hot, mowing down innocent people in the streets who couldn't escape in time. Arcadio's kid soldiers are no match for these pros. The enemy brings out the big guns and blows up the church bell tower with one shot. Another shot smashes through Arcadio's weak defenses, and his ego along with it. Now he's finally getting a taste of how brutal war really is. He's cowering in a corner, shaking like a leaf, while Stevenson would rather die fighting than give up. After taking out a few enemies, Stevenson goes down in the barrage and the school headquarters falls. Arcadio's running for his life, and now he's most like Napoleon, but Napoleon at Waterloo. While even Macondo's regular folks are fighting back against the bloody slaughter, Arcadio's just using the time they're buying him to run away. He tries to hide in a shelter, but the women and kids there throw him out. He begs the magistrate for protection, but the guy can't even protect himself. Ironically, his Napoleon get-up that he was so proud of becomes his death warrant. The enemy commander spots him in the crowd right away. Now he remembers he's a Buendia, but it's too late. At least in this moment, Arcadio finally mans up. He steps forward to surrender, so his family doesn't get hurt. No trial, no questions. They take him straight to the cemetery to be shot. In his last moments, Arcadio realizes how much he loves the people he used to hate. His last words are to name his unborn kid after old Buendia if it's a boy, or Ursula if it's a girl. This hints that the Buendia family's fate is about to start a new cycle. He waves goodbye to Rebeca watching from afar, while Jose just stares blankly. He still has no clue the guy about to die is his son. With Arcadio's death, the story of the Buendia family's second generation is coming to a close. Auri sneaked into his aunt's room and saw her sleeping in light clothes. The two faintly visible cherry tops made him lose his mind instantly. He stretched out his hand as if possessed, but his aunt, who was awakened, didn't resist. Since rejecting Pietro's proposal, which led to his suicide, Amaranta lives with deep guilt. She pours all her energy into raising her brother Aureliano's illegitimate son. However, their prolonged intimacy sparks an unusual affection between them. Amaranta, never having experienced a man's touch, gradually finds herself unable to resist her nephew's hormone-charged gaze. One night, Ar stealthily follows his aunt into the warehouse.
Me disculpas.
Fully aware it's ethically wrong, Amaranta's body betrays her will. Every caress from Aura sends electric shivers through her limbs. Suddenly,
Amaranta!
Snapping back to reality, Emma realizes she almost makes a grave mistake. Just as they're falling into this twisted relationship, Aura's father, Colonel Aureliano, is captured by the conservative army and brought back to Macondo. His fellow revolutionaries from the town have all perished in battle. Amaranta and Ursula are torn between grief and relief, having believed Aureliano was dead. The elders mourn their lost son, while others rally around the military, supporting their spiritual leader. The conservatives bring Aureliano back to Macondo for execution, aiming to make an example of him. Ursula barges into the military camp, demanding to see her son. Surprisingly, Captain Carnicero agrees. What should be a joyous mother-son reunion turns out to be heartbreaking. Ursula has recently lost a grandchild, and now her son faces the firing squad. She mumbles about the events at home since Aureliano's departure, but he's already aware of everything, thanks to his ability to foresee the future. Oddly, he hasn't foreseen his own death. Before parting, Aureliano urges his mother not to beg anyone for his life.
Esta es la guerra. Mejor, haga de cuenta que me fusilaron hace rato.
That evening, Captain Carnicero and his guards hit the local brothel to blow off some steam. To his surprise, all the girls give him the cold shoulder, with some even shooting him dirty looks.
Nadie quiere acostarse con un condenado a muerte, Capitán Carnicero. Es de mala suerte.
Pillar explains that she's done a reading. Anyone involved in Colonel Aureliano's execution is gonna bite the dust.
Así se escondan en el fin del mundo.
Carnicero starts to sweat bullets, not realizing Aureliano's got such clout around here. He tries to explain that he admires Colonel Aureliano, but has to follow orders as a soldier. Soon, the government greenlights Aureliano's execution, set to take place in Macondo Cemetery. Jose and Rebeca, living nearby, watch from afar, just like they did with Arcadio, facing the firing squad. Aureliano flashes back to that distant afternoon when his father showed him ice for the first time. Then, he pictures old Buendia sitting under the chestnut tree, lost in thoughts of him. A slight smile plays on Aureliano's lips. Meanwhile, Carnicero's getting more and more antsy, and his soldiers are looking spooked. Clearly, Pilar's prophecy from last night's got them rattled. Suddenly, Jose and Rebeca show up to crash the execution. They can't stand by and watch their brother get gunned down. But Carnicero orders his men to stand down and release Aureliano.
Enviado por la divina providencia.
He's scared of Pilar's prediction and can't bring himself to kill a freedom-fighting hero. Jose's appearance gives him an out. In the end, Carnicero and his soldiers join Aureliano's rebel army, throwing themselves into the fight for the people's liberation. Over the next year, Macondo enjoys a long overdue period of calm. Arcadio's widow gives birth to twins, breathing new life into the Buendia family. Jose and Rebeca, tired of living next to the graveyard, move into Arcadio's old mansion. As Jose steps inside, the door slams shut behind him mysteriously. A gunshot rings out, and blood seeps under the door. It seems to have a life of its own, flowing through the hallway, out the front door, down the street to the Buendia house, across the living room, and right up to Ursula's feet. Seeing this eerie sight, she knows something's up. She follows the blood trail and finds her eldest son dead. Rebeca has no clue how her husband died. It's like some divine punishment without a trace. Jose's death becomes Macondo's most baffling unsolved mystery. Meanwhile, Aureliano senses his brother's death but can't return home because peace talks are underway. Liberal Party representatives have already caved to the conservative government, offering Aureliano a cushy government job to lay down his arms. But Aureliano doesn't care about personal gain. He's all about the people's interests.
Firmamos cuando tengan algo más que ofrecerle a la gente. Mientras tanto, vamos a continuar con nuestras luchas.
From then on, wherever there's injustice and oppression, Aureliano's rebel army shows up. He becomes a living legend to the people and a nightmare for conservative bigwigs. They can't show their faces without risking bullets from all directions.
¡Que viva la revolución!
Aureliano always manages to slip away after each assassination, with the government putting a hefty price on his head. At first, Aureliano doesn't sweat it until a traitor tries to take him out for the reward. Though he dodges the death, he realizes the Liberal Party's got some bad apples. So he cleans house, weeding out traitors with an iron fist. Through countless fierce and brutal battles, Aureliano becomes tough as nails and cold as ice. Surprisingly, he and enemy General Moncada become kindred spirits. Despite being on opposite sides, they share the same political views.
Todos los políticos son la misma mierda, Moncada. La única diferencia es que los liberales van a misa de 5 y los conservadores a misa de 8.
Moncada's come to say goodbye. The government's appointed him as Macondo's military governor, Aureliano's hometown. He promises to look after Aureliano's people. Moncada keeps his word. He starts by swapping out the soldiers on the streets for unarmed cops, helping folks shake off the war jitters. He champions freedom and equality, making sure everyone gets a shot at education. The school, which had been used as a military barracks, finally gets back to its original purpose. During this time, Aura still can't get over his burning love for his aunt.
Soy tu tía. Lo que estamos haciendo es horrible.
Es cierto. Hermoso.
Amaranta's almost ready to give in, but reason wins out over desire in the end. Her firm rejection breaks Aura's heart, and in typical rebellious fashion, he runs away to join the army. At the same time, Aureliano dreams his father's bringing him something. When he wakes up, he's holding a little yellow flower, a sign of decay and withering. Opening Aureliano's letter, Ursula breaks down in tears. Aureliano's hunches are usually spot on. Old Buendia's time is almost up. Ursula unties the ropes that have bound him for years, hoping he'll spend his final moments in peace and comfort.
Trata de dormir un poquito. Mira que la tarde está bonita.
But Buendia can't sleep. He wants to see the outside world one last time. When he opens the door, he enters a magical space. He sees his grandson, reuniting with his son Aureliano at the military camp. Buendia turns back to his room, relieved, only to see Arcadio and Melquiades bathing in the river. He rushes to swim over, afraid his dear friend might be swept away again. But what's lost can't be regained. Maybe it's time to let go of his worries. Then, a door appears in the middle of the river, leading to his alchemy lab where he spent most of his life. His descendants are busy studying the manuscripts he left behind. Aguilar, his old enemy killed by his spear, comes to guide him. They open the final door and step into a dazzling starry sky, fading into the distance. Countless tiny yellow flowers rain down silently, forming a quiet storm that sweeps through Macondo all night. The flowers cover rooftops and block doorways, forcing people to clear a path with shovels for the funeral procession. Everyone spontaneously pays their respects to Macondo's pioneer and founder. Amidst a sea of flowers, Buendia ends his final journey. He remains forever in the free land he built with his own hands. The glory of the first generation of the Buendia family comes to an end, but his descendants continue to write their own legends, generation after generation. Years later, Macondo's back on high alert because Aureliano's marching in with his army. The government orders General Moncada to hold Macondo at all costs, and war is about to engulf the town again. Ursula storms into the military camp in a rage, but the son she finds there seems like a stranger. His face has hardened into steel, showing a coldness and disregard for old ties that she's never seen before.
Hace rato que no estábamos tan tranquilos.
¿Sabe cuántos años llevo esperando el momento de recuperar Macondo para nuestra causa?
No sé, pero lo que sí sé es que estás a tiempo de hacer lo correcto.
Ursula can't talk Aureliano into withdrawing, and war breaks out. With Aureliano's battle cry in charge, the first season of Netflix's 100 Years of Solitude comes to a close. The original novel chronicles the rise and fall of 7 generations of the Buendia family over a century, serving as a microcosm of 19th century Latin American society and history. It dives deep into themes like loneliness, fate, time, and history, showcasing humanity's sense of powerlessness in the face of destiny and society. As they say, every ending is a new beginning. So let's catch up for the next story. Stay tuned.